Equally as controversial, I think, sometimes, depending on how it's asked. This person wants to know, is hell real or is it figurative? And they say, I'm specifically asking about the way that it is described in the Bible, burning fire, brimstone, and the like. So they want to know, is hell real or is it figurative? Now, we sort of talked about this before we hit record.
And we joked and said the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. So let's unpack that for a minute when we say, yes, it's real and yes, it's figurative. What do we mean by that?
I think it's the difference in the definition because, and this, I know this once again sounds like splitting hairs, is the difference between the definition of real or literal, because the way that hearing the whole question, it sounds like the question is actually, is the description of hell in the Bible literal or figurative? But the question was, is it real or figurative? It's possible for something to be real, but not the way someone talks about it be literal, right? And and I'll just use hell in this thing. I could say when someone says, oh, you went to Alabama, and I said, yes, that place is like hell on earth. I don't literally mean it's like hell on earth, but you've been to Alabama.
But you do.
Yeah. But
You are correct.
right, no, there's a difference between something. Alabama is a real place, and it's a bad place. I'm just joking. It's real.
We love everyone in Alabama.
That's right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think when you're
You
asking,
can leave.
That's right.
yes,
You are not captive.
we can help you.
Right.
But yeah, so I think it's important to understand. And certain things in the Bible are that way. I hear a lot of people say, because I believe the Bible has real truth, and there are a lot of, go back to our conversation just now about the Bible versus Jesus being the ultimate authority. I shouldn't say a lot, but there are people who believe the Bible is the ultimate authority that believe because that's the case, everything that's real truth has to be literal truth. It has to be taken word for word the way it's meant to be. Well, it's possible that someone is describing a real thing, maybe a real event, or just a real truth about God or life, but they're doing so in figurative ways.
If I take, for instance, I want to describe something that really is a real thing, as a 61-year-old, I want to explain that to my 4-year-old granddaughter. She does not yet have the language for me to do anything but to describe it in language that she does have. So that when she grows up and she goes, my grandpa said it was like this, and she realizes, one, either my grandpa didn't know what he was talking about because he described it in a way that when I really know what it is, it ain't that. Or she, you know what I'm saying? She either has to discount me or she has to come to the fuller understanding, he was using figures of speech to describe something that I wouldn't have understood if he had used the exact right words to describe it. And it's very possible that a spiritual place or a place that is currently we don't know much about,
A state
of existence that we don't know much about, that the only way for the person who knew what it was like, which I think is the only person that talks about it. In Revelation, it's described,
Revelation,
but it's Jesus that is revealing it.
Yep.
Or when he was on the planet, he's using language for us that may be all he had at his disposal because we wouldn't have understood it any other way.
Just to bring this point out, Jesus, we know the images that Jesus did use to describe hell was a literal place in Jerusalem.
Yeah, the name he used was definitely a literal garbage dump.
That's right, where garbage would smolder and burn
forever
in their view.
And that hundreds of years before was a place of child sacrifice and was of despicable kinds of evil.
Exactly
and so he's drawing on contexts that they would have had to describe the kind of existence that will exist. That
no good Jewish person would ever have wanted to go to Gehenna
live in Gehenna
because it was a terrible place that
it is a God-forsaken place.
It was a God-forsaken place, and so he's letting them know that with language, whether or not he is describing what the future holds for people who decide to be God-forsaken by their own choice. I don't know. Or not.
Well, and I think what Jesus is trying to describe is...
I doubt it, personally.
Okay. You doubt what part?
I doubt that
he was trying to be literal.
I think it's figures of speech. Yes. I don't know, and what he describes is bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
it's
yeah,
really
sure,
bad. But
Well,
I
isn't
don't
it-
know that it has to be literal.
And I don't understand why that. And I know a lot of Christians who will sort of shy back from that, what you just said, and I don't see the problem with it as much because, as you said, the book of Revelation also uses those images of fire and brimstone and
Yeah.
burning and all of those things. But let's be fair, that is also the same book that describes Jesus in ways that nobody takes literally.
No.
That Jesus is coming with a sword sticking out of his mouth.
And blood dripping off
Blood
his robes.
dripping off a robe. Nobody believes that that's how Jesus is going to look when he returns. And yet,
Well,
we don't
most-
have a.
there-
Well, okay, sorry.
yeah,
I can't say nobody.
I'm unfortunately, I know some that do.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But you get
Most
my point.
people
Most
who know
people.
the Bible don't take it that way.
And so I don't. And again, we could both be wrong.
Right.
On saying that there may be a literal fire, and that's why Jesus said that. I find it a little bit of a stretch because of those other things.
And don't you think? Because once again, these questions are kind of hard to answer facelessly.
Yeah.
I mean, we appreciate you sending the question, but once again, in the aspect of trying to be honoring, the question I would ask someone, which I do regularly when I was teaching students on a week-to-week basis, this question comes up a lot because especially in most youth, I'll say our youth group's actually pretty unique, I think, at least I should say when I was doing it week to week, of how little we talked about hell.
Now those other people.
No, I just mean
No, I'm just kidding.
in how little we talk, because many of the students who came, they have lots of questions, particularly about hell and being scared from hell and being running, and so they'd have questions about these kind of ideas. And the question I would often ask is why is it important for you to understand what existence in hell is? Because there's one possibility, and I had a student who was honest enough to say it's kind of like a weigh in my options kind of idea, like how bad is bad, like how bad, because I don't want to do all the things that I feel like God would want for me to do, but I don't want that because that's really bad. Or is it this fear, and I have lots of people of a God of love in some kind of eternal torment of people, that being a hard thing to reconcile. And so what I always came to with students was one, that Jesus is describing a real reality of existence of what life without God forever will be like. That even in this life, even if I don't believe in God, I get glimpses of the beauty of God and the grace of God, and just living in the way the world operates is by grace of God. That there's an existence without all of that because I've chosen that. I've chosen I don't want God. The other side of that is that God is so loving, and that's what I often use with people who have questions about like eternal torment or fire and brimstone, that I believe that the God I see in Jesus is so full of love and so full of grace that he will always do the most loving thing for all people, even if it's hard for me to understand certain things as love. And I think for many of us who want to, as Christian pastors who want to split hairs as far as hell and heaven and who gets in and who doesn't, I think we will be shocked by some of the people that I would have assumed that guy was definitely going to hell.
Or that guy was definitely going to heaven.
Sure, right. That God will be more gracious than we can imagine, because what life has taught me so far is God has already been more gracious than I could have ever imagined.
That's right.
So it's a real, and I like the way Jason said it, state of existence. I don't know if I've used that phrase before, but
I
that's
have tried with people before, because I don't like to get caught up in the imagery, because there's not much I can do with it. I can't. I'm okay. I mean, that may very well be literally what it is. Almost always when a person asks me that, it's because they have some doubts, but, you used this example of the student who said, I'm weighing my options. Well, I would say, I've said to people, the one thing I know for sure is God won't be there.
That's right.
right.
And nothing involved with God. It's been prepared, and it wasn't made for humans, it was made for the devil and those that follow him. So it's a God-forsaken place. I've just said to people, even if you don't want to follow God, you're asking me about what God said means that you believe there is a God.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So you, by your question, believe there is one. And that there are things that God does that you do like, even though you might not want to do everything he says. I've said to people, you should probably take time and list out all the things that God is providing for you that you like, and then imagine that
You don't get
those don't exist. Not because you don't deserve them, but because they are a part of what God does.
Yes.
And so whatever hell is, nothing of God will be there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And I think when you just say that, then I don't know how that hits people. I really don't. But I would imagine it does not hit quite like an image of a horrible image that would kind of wake me up to what that really means.
Yeah.
And I think back to what we originally said is when Jesus and the writers of Scripture are using these images, I think that's what they're trying to do, is they're just trying to use what was available to them at the time to, and I don't like the word scare, but it's to jolt the person listening into, trust me, this is not what you want.
Yeah.
What you really want is God.
Yeah.
And I want you to see that. I can't make you. Not even God is going to make you. But trust me, this is not what you want.
Everything in your life that has come to you that you know you nor anyone else created, that is good. Everything. I mean, the
And
world.
even when you say created, that's,
anything around you that you look at and you go, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I love that. I love that I get to ride a motorcycle wherever I want to, and the wind blowing in my face. Well, you didn't create the wind.
That's right.
You didn't create the sun. Any of those things you like. Every time you have to say, I'm thankful for anything.
Yeah.
You admit I didn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the importance of when you talk about Jesus using a real place of Gehenna as his thing, and that this is a place where these atrocities and these evils of child sacrifice, which I think is so... my mind can't really even fathom it.
No.
And I read a lot of like ancient history kind of textbook stuff, and you read about it a lot, but my mind can't fathom, because it's not just, that's a horror. I mean, that by itself, just the fact that exists is a horror. But the place that a person's soul and mind has to get to, that an entire society would not just say, that's okay with us, but that's good and that's helpful for society. That in and of itself, when you talk about God being rude, God is not involved in any of that. And and I think Jesus is pointing to, you've seen in this world where places where God's will is not being done. Yeah. You don't want to be, and no one, no matter how like, they're going to play AC/DC in hell and all my friends are going to be in hell. None of that. The real hell on earth situations are things that for us in America, we mostly read about and we see on news occasionally. And we look at, and you think, what happens to a person that they would do things like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I think that's part of the description of it is it's not just what's happening to me, it's what's happening within me.
All right. I hope that helped.
I'll just say this, and and nobody can be here. Just the whole topic for me, and this hasn't always been true for me. There's a heaviness to all of that is sitting on the three of us right now. I can just feel it.
I almost said the same thing.
That whole idea to me, there's a grief that comes over me to even have to describe it. It feels playful somewhat to people, and I think we use it in threatening ways. I don't think any of it was meant to be that kind of way. It was just, there's a heaviness about that topic.
True. So we'll move on to another one.
Yeah, I do not want anyone to go there.
Can we talk about politics again? Let's go to something lighter. Let's talk about politics.
I don't know. Pretty much the same these days.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
So